Hello and welcome back for another reading from Charlotte's Web. Today I'm in my kitchen and I thought it would be kind of fun to do a reading with our cow. We call her Lucille, kind of over my shoulder as if we were at the Zuckerman's farm. Okay, so here we go. Chapter 13, Good Progress. Far into the night, while the other creatures were sleeping, Charlotte worked on her web. First, she ripped out a few of the orb lines near the center. She left the radial lines alone as they were needed for support. As she worked, her 8 legs were great help to her. So were her teeth. She loved to weave and she was an expert at it. When she was finished ripping things out, her web looked something like this. A spider can produce several kinds of thread. She uses a dry, tough thread for the foundation lines and a sticky thread for the snare lines, the ones that catch and hold insects. Charlotte decided to use her dry thread for writing the new message. If I write the word terrific with a sticky thread, she thought, every bug that comes along will get stuck in it and it will ruin the effect. Now let's see, the first letter is T. Charlotte climbed to a point at the top of the left-hand side of the web. Swinging her spinnerets into position, she attached her thread and dropped down. As she dropped, her spinning tubes went into action and she let out thread. At the bottom, she attached the thread. This formed the upright part of the letter T. Charlotte was not satisfied, however. She climbed up and made another attachment, first right next to the first. Then she carried the line down so that she had a double line instead of a single line. It will show up better if I make the whole thing with double lines. She climbed back up, moved over about an inch to the left, touched her spinnerets to the web, and then carried the line across to the right, forming the top of the letter T. She repeated this, making a double. Her 8 legs were very busy helping. Now for the E. Charlotte got so interested in her work that she began to talk to herself as though to cheer herself on. If you had been sitting quietly in the barn cellar that evening, you would have heard something like this. Now for the R. Up we go. Attach, descend, payout line. Woo! Attach. Good. Up you go. Repeat. Attach, descend, payout line. Whoa, girl, steady now. Attach, climb, attach. Over to the right, payout line, attach. Now right, down, swing loop, around, around. Okay, now to the left. Attach, climb, repeat. Okay, easy, keep the lines together. Now then, out, down for the leg of the R. Payout line, woo, attach, ascend, repeat. Good girl. And so, talking to herself, the spider worked at this difficult task. When it was completed, she felt hungry. She ate a small bug that she had been saving. Then she slept. The next morning, Wilbur arose and stood beneath the web. He breathed the morning air into his lungs. Drops of dew catching the sun made the web stand out clearly. When Lurvy arrived with breakfast, there was the handsome pig, and over him, woven in neatly blocked letters, was the word terrific. It was another miracle. I just want to make sure you can see it. Lurvy rushed and called Mr. Zuckerman. Mr. Zuckerman rushed and called Mrs. Zuckerman. Mrs. Zuckerman ran to the phone and called the Arables. The Arables climbed into their truck and hurried over. Remember the Arables, it's Fern's family. Everybody stood at the pig pen and stared at the web and read the word over and over, while Wilbur, who felt really terrific, quietly stood swelling his chest out and swinging his snout from side to side underneath. Terrific, breathed Zuckerman in joyful adoration. Edith, you'd better phone the reporter at the Weekly Chronicle and tell him what has happened. He will want to know about this. He may want to bring the photographer. There isn't a pig in the whole state as terrific as our pig. News spread. People who had journeyed to see Wilbur when he was some pig came back again to see him now that he was terrific. That afternoon, when Mr. Zuckerman went to milk the cows and clean up the tie-ups, he was still thinking about what a wondrous pig he owned. Lurvy, he called. There is to be no more cow manure thrown down into the pig pen. I have a terrific pig. I want that pig to be clean, bright straw every day for his bedding. Understand? Yes, sir, said Lurvy. Furthermore, said Mr. Zuckerman, I want you to start building a crate for Wilbur. I've decided to take this pig to the county fair on September 6th. Make a crate large enough and paint it green with gold letters. Well, what will the letters say? Asked Lurvy. They should say, Zuckerman's famous pig. Lurvy picked up a pitchfork and walked away to get some clean straw. Having such an important pig was going to mean plenty of extra work. He could see that. Below the apple orchard, at the end of the path, was a dump where Mr. Zuckerman threw all sorts of trash and stuff that nobody wanted anymore. Here, in a small clearing hidden by young alders and wild berry bushes, was an astonishing pile of old bottles and empty tin cans and dirty rags and bits of metal and broken bottles and broken hinges and broken springs and dead batteries and last month's magazines and old discarded dish mops, tattered overalls, rusty spikes, leaky pails, forgotten stoppers, and useless junk of all kinds, including the wrong size crank for a broken ice cream freezer. Templeton knew the dump and he liked it. There were good hiding places there, an excellent cover for a rat. And there was usually a tin can with food still clinging to the inside. Templeton was down there now, rummaging around, when he returned to the barn. When he came back to the barn, he carried in his mouth an advertisement that he had torn out from a crumpled magazine. How's this? He said to Charlotte. It says crunchy. Crunchy would be a good word to write in your web. It's just the wrong idea, said Charlotte. Couldn't be worse. We don't want Zuckerman to think that Wilbur is crunchy. He might start thinking about that crisp, crunchy bacon and tasty ham that could come from Wilbur. That would put ideas into his head. We mustn't advertise Wilbur as food. We must advertise Wilbur and his noble qualities, not his tastiness. Please get another word, Templeton. The rat looked disgusted, but he sneaked away to the dump and was back in a while with a strip of cotton cloth. How's this? It's the label off of an old shirt, said Templeton. Charlotte examined the label. It said pre-shrunk. I'm sorry, Templeton, she said, but pre-shrunk is out of the question. We want Zuckerman to think that Wilbur is nicely filled out, not all shrunk up. I'll have to ask you to try again. What do you think I am, a messenger boy? Asked Templeton. I'm not going to spend all my time chasing down to the dump for advertising material. Just once more, please, said Charlotte. I'll tell you what I'll do, said Templeton. I know there's a package of soap flakes in the woodshed. It has writing on it. I'll bring you back a piece of that package. He climbed the rope that hung onto the wall and disappeared through the hole in the ceiling. When he came back, he had a strip of blue and white cardboard in his teeth. There, he said. How's that? Charlotte read the words. With new radiant action. What does that mean? Asked Charlotte, who never used soap flakes in her life. How should I know? Said Templeton. You asked for words. I brought them. I suppose the next thing you'll want me to get is a dictionary. Together they studied the soap ad. With new radiant action, repeated Charlotte. Wilbur, she called. Wilbur, who was asleep in the straw, jumped up. Run around, said Charlotte. I want to see you in action. I want to see if you're radiant. Wilbur raced to the end of the yard. Now back again, faster, said Charlotte. Wilbur galloped back. His skin shone. His tail was fine and tight curled. Jump in the air, said Charlotte. Wilbur jumped as high as he could. Keep your knees straight and touch the ground with your ears, said Charlotte. Look at how good he looks. Wilbur obeyed. Do a backflip with a half twist. There's the backflip. Wilbur bent over backwards, writhing and twisting as he went. Okay, Wilbur, you can go back to sleep. Okay, Templeton, the soap ad will do. I'm not sure Wilbur's action is exactly radiant, but it's interesting. Actually, said Wilbur, I feel radiant. Do you? Said Charlotte. Well, you're a good little pig, and radiant you shall be. I'm in this thing pretty deep now. I might as well go to the limit. Tired from his romp, Wilbur lay down in the clean straw. He closed his eyes. The straw seemed kind of scratchy, not as comfortable as the cow manure, which was always delightfully soft. So he pushed the straw to one side and stretched out in the manure. Wilbur sighed. It had been a busy day, his first day of being terrific. Dozens of people had visited his yard during the afternoon, and he had to stand and pose, looking as terrific as he could. Now he was tired. Fern had arrived and seated herself quietly on her stool in the corner. "Tell me a story, Charlotte," said Wilbur, as he lay waiting for sleep. "Tell me a story." So Charlotte, although she too was tired, did what Wilbur wanted. "Once upon a time," she began, "I had a beautiful cousin who managed to build her web across a small stream. One day, a tiny fish leaped into the air and got tangled in the web. My cousin was very much surprised, of course, and the fish was thrashing wildly. My cousin hardly dared tackle it, but she did. She swooped down, threw great masses of wrapping material around the fish, and fought bravely to capture it." "Did she succeed?" asked Wilbur. It was a never to be forgotten battle," said Charlotte. "There was the fish, caught only by one fin and its tail wildly thrashing and shining in the sun. There was the web, sagging dangerously under the weight of the fish." "How much did the fish weigh?" asked Wilbur. "I don't know," said Charlotte. "There was my cousin, slipping in, dodging out, beaten mercilessly over the head by the wild thrashing fish, dancing in, dancing out, throwing her threads and fighting hard. First she threw a left around the tail. The fish lashed back. Then a left to the tail and a right to the midsection. The fish lashed back. Then she dodged to one side and threw a right, and then another right to the fin. Then a hard left to the head while the web swayed and stretched." "Well, then what happened?" asked Wilbur. "Nothing," said Charlotte. "The fish lost the fight. My cousin wrapped it up so tight it couldn't budge." "And then what happened?" asked Wilbur. "Well, nothing. My cousin kept the fish for a while, and then when she got good and ready, she ate it." "Tell me another story," begged Wilbur. So Charlotte told him about another cousin of hers who was an aeronaut. "What's an aeronaut?" asked Wilbur. "A balloonist," said Charlotte. "My cousin used to stand on her head and let out enough thread to form a balloon. Then she'd let go and be lifted into the air and carried upward in the warm wind." "Is that true, or are you making it up?" "No, it's true," said Charlotte. "I have some very remarkable cousins. Now, Wilbur, it's time you went to sleep." "Sing something," begged Wilbur, closing his eyes. So Charlotte sang a lullaby while crickets chirped in the grass and the barn grew dark. This was the song she sang. "Sleep, sleep, my love, my only, deep, deep in the dung and dark. Do not be afraid and be not lonely. This is the hour when frogs and thrushes praise the world from the woods and the rushes. Rest from care, my one and only, deep in the dung and the dark." But Wilbur was already asleep. When the song ended, Fern got up and went home. That, my friends, is the end of chapter 13. But I did want to just go over one last little part with you. The part about the aeronaut, the balloonist. What Charlotte was saying is that her cousin used to stand on her head and let out enough thread from her spinneret that when the thread came out, it formed like a little balloon. Then she'd let go and be lifted into the air and carried upward by the balloon that came out of her spinneret, like it was the web that she spun. That will be an important fact later in our story. Okay, my friends, that is the end of chapter 13. We will meet again for chapter 14 soon. Bye-bye.